Hello, everybody. We're here together to discuss a very important strategic question. What are we going to eat tomorrow? It is a central question. It reminds me of school and the test we had. I present myself. I am Marie Stankowiak. I work in an engineering school in Lille, and we are handling Delicat, which is agroalimentary food industry. Let me do an introduction on the nutrition of tomorrow. Some key figures to bear in mind. Stacking.fr on the eating habits in France. 73% of French consume more homemade products. 6% French look at the ingredients in a food item. It's interesting to see the evolution. And another inquest from October 2017, very recent. 62% consume food from the bio industry at least once a month. With equal budgets, 12% of the French agree to change their nutrition, including more organic food and food that have better environmental impact. These are some elements, interesting elements. What are the development factors in nutrition today? Demographic factors, the aging of population, 20% will be above 50 years old in 10 years. The household is changing, the size of household is changing, economic factors, there is a crisis, disturbing consumption in France. In France, there's another thing, is the cultural factor and the pride of national identity. In France, we like to sit down and eat, and that does not exist that much in other countries. Consumption, a consumer want to share and discuss about the subject, and there are some technological factors. The digital aspect is important and is increasing. These are some factors that might impact nutrition in the future, and that gives some hints on some development that might occur. In the coming years, there will be more snacking, an increase of snacking, and with veggie proteins or insects, as we'll hear in a moment. We'll have more flexitarianism, which is less consumption but better, less meat, drive and collect to get its shopping basket wherever we want, mobile applications, more transparency on products. Consumers want to know where they come from, how they were transformed, where they were raised, some more customized products, less trash. I would like to present the speakers. Claude Gérard is going to do a presentation on nutrition and food on the basis of insects. Mr. Roub Dalem, who is going to speak about veg-based proteins, and Jean Bernoud, the link between agriculture, industry, and development of the regions. Claude Gérard, please, your talk on proteins via insects.
Est-ce que, s'il vous plaît? Excellent. Nice. Super. Donc, bon matin.
Good morning.
Natif de Montréal.
I am coming from Montreal. I traveled, I came over the pond to make this talk. Totem Nutrition is a project, and the origin of this name is, we wanted to give tribute to the indigenous people who are respecting nature and have a very small footprint on nature. This is the origin of the name Totem. I am herbalist and a cook since years, and during my career I've been thinking a lot, and I realized that it's insects, and the insects occurred in my life. I began to cook with insects and try to make them more appetizing, if I may say so. And 98, in the year 98, it was completely unknown. I began to test around, and then after a while, after all the situation in agriculture, the raising of cattle, the quality of the fish, I began to think and to realize and ask myself questions on how we raise cattle and how it takes a lot of surface to create proteins, and very often it is badly organized. And I'm here talking about Canada. I visited the fabrics, the industrial sites, and we wanted to create a company that respects sustainable development by using insect proteins. We have a veggie service department. We use herbalist plants and veggie proteins. We develop different types of products. Totem goes over a couple of years. There were different phases. First phase was to develop food items, offering a new option to the client, to the customer. From our side in Canada, we produced spaghetti. We worked on flour and on the base of different types of mushrooms, algae. So we are working and trying around. Our objective is to not to destroy the soil. And in Canada, we have a tendency, there's a trend to use wild items like mushrooms, several plants in nature. So it's difficult to control and to see how people collect these items in nature. So we replicated the wild items in production ecosystems. We want to replicate and use what happens in existing nature, but in a controlled production area. We call this a production ecosystem in order to hinder people to go to the nature, and in order to be able to have access to the same articles, products, plants, insects, same type of plants, without going into nature. So for the insect farm, we began with the tenebrion. The farm was a second step, right? Our aim was to raise the larvae And the coleopter, it is incredible because what is interesting in the insect, it's its nutritional value. There's a high level of protein, up to 60% protein in an insect. And in such a small little animal, we can create flavors depending on what you feed it. It is a challenge. There's a lot of R&D going on. If, for instance, we feed it with different typical products, the insect has an almond flyer. If we feed him with different type of nutrition, it might develop like roasted flavors. The spectrum is very wide. So this is part of our research and development process. It is an immersion project, and we proceed step by step. We collaborate with the chefs, with the cooks, and then we collaborate with the government and with the research centers in Quebec on agriculture. Same applies to the plants. In our R&D, we are beginning to explore. And interesting with plants is to find their medical qualities and properties. You do probably consume some of them. It is the plant of the anemone. We are trying to offer high-quality products and a good nutrition helping to prevent diseases. We think that health is depending from prevention, and prevention depends from nutrition. By consuming daily, if possible, some of these items, it helps to stabilize certain diseases, disorders, or to impede them as a whole, depending how you live. So we want to create a site in Laval, north of Montreal. The government is supporting us in this approach. We got a great subsidy on the raising of a specific insect. During 1.5 years, we'll be researching on it in order to stabilize the production and create, above all, a use. And it will create some environment near to a farm maker's environment, very hygienic. This is the big challenge. It is an emerging product, it's an emerging production, and we need to respect the production means and habits, introducing GFSI systems with the critical point tests and inspections during transformation. There is no such company, maybe in Europe, but I can tell you in Belgium and Land and the Netherlands are leaders in the insect production. In the Netherlands, there are great transformation sites. They got ACERT certification. It was a first time in history, and this is a source of inspiration for us. Our goal is to develop different products, transforming nutrition and food items. We developed the products here on the slide. They are already in the market in Montreal and the surroundings. It is spaghetti with 18 or 7% of insects, and the other is based on veggie proteins. The little one with the insect you can see here on your right. This is flour with another insect, carob. You can transform it at home and bake protein muffins or bread with proteins. The insect, as you see in our spaghetti here, in our pasta, 18%, this is 32 grams for 95 grams. The insect is not only a protein. The insect has a high rate of other minerals. Fibers. It is like salt, pepper. You can just pour it over any dish. It is very tasty. It has a lot of minerals and can be hence considered like substitution to salt, which is an interesting option to discover this hazelnut taste. As I said earlier, it depends how we process before. What we wanted to do is build a site with zero waste. Insect raising, transformation of the insect, the whole insect, because we use the whole insect as a whole. And then we want to build glass houses, and we'll have compost, and the waste from production, from insect production, will be used to nurture the plants. So we are setting up a closed cycle with zero waste and premium products. We are specializing in premium products. There are different types of insects for different types of markets. Some insects are quicker to produce and easier to produce. It's cheaper. But what we are looking for is to offer very high-quality insects in order to open up the gastronomy sector and propose these insects to the pharmacists. Hence, there are different type of activities or segment of activities, and the pharmacists, the pharmaceutical industry is interesting because in their skeleton, the insects have glucosamine, gypsum, and different other stimulating elements for the immunitary system. In the United States, in Vermont, we're raising chicken. They're raising chicken by using crickets, live crickets in the nutrition of the hens. They need less vaccination. They don't need hormone boosts because the bones were very solid, the meat was much more firm, and the quality of the was more tasty. This is another market for the future. The animals nourished with insects that will offer completely new product qualities and products. We are aiming to participate in this type of market. At the end, what is interesting for me in sustainable development and in responsible economy is to respect the environment, the footprint, to diminish the footprint in nature, and one of the ways to go about it is to be inspired by the life of the insects themselves and the plants, the biomimetism. You can be inspired from the velcro, from the bardane. It is the GPS are inspired themselves from the ants. There are a lot of options we can look at And these creatures are just beside us and can inspire us. This is, I think, it's going to be interesting. Thank you very much. Thank you for this intervention, Claude. Just a short question. The insects, above all in the Western world, are not easy to consume just from a cultural standpoint. How can you have people eating insects and change the habits with regard to insects? What we decided to do is to target the chefs. Because in Canada, like here, I guess, they are democratization agents. So we are linked with the hotel and cooking schools, and myself, I was trained in such schools, and I have linkages with them. And we begin to play with this product with the chefs. The government needs to be sensibilized, and there is a series of steps we did with them, with research centers, to develop a credibility, to give some credibility to the product, and to show that the insect product is not dirty, it's not rubbish, it's not trash. It's very good. It's alive creatures. They're very clean. It is an approach. It's a step-by-step approach. So it's developed tasty food. Let people taste those items in order to understand that the picture of the insect we have in our head is not an obstacle. It should not be an obstacle. We need to think that insect is like seafood. It's the same, if you like, homard, lobsters, and so on. Before the lobsters were eaten by the poor, it was and the prisoners were fed with lobsters at the beginning. Sushi is the same. It was the whole approach to open up the markets. And now in Quebec, there are 10 sushi shops in every street. So we need to conscientize people and educate them. Right. So it's all about R&D, education, and accompany the change to change our nutrition habits. Thank you very much indeed. Christophe Robdelem, please, on plant-based proteins.
Où sont les présentations? Vous savez où sont les présentations? Ça marche. Ok. C'est bon? Voilà, ça marche. Ça, c'est la dernière, je pense. Je commence par la fin. Ça va aller plus vite.
Présentation inversée,
c'est original. Ouais. On peut s'adapter.
Alors, c'est ça.
On peut être agile, voilà. Ok, merci. Donc bonjour à tous.
Good morning to all of you. Christophe Robdelem. I am responsible for the Rocket Group, and I wanted to share with you the development that we have had for the plant-based protein. It's exactly the same as the previous speaker, because often we combine plant-based protein and new resources. So a few words about Rocket, quite briefly. briefly, Roquette is a family group, an international one. We buy raw materials, wheat, maize, in order to change them in starch, protein, fiber, oil. And as a whole, we use 8,000 people, and we have 20 industrial sites. So we are located everywhere in France, in the United States, in India, in China. And with the same job, we wanted to process the agricultural biomass. We are in the top 5 in this type of industry, the starch industry, the starch and protein industry. So these are important volumes, 8 million tons of raw materials processed, and important efforts in R&D, innovation, in order to try to find new solutions for the food application, but also for the industrial applications. More than 300 people work in the R&D department, and mainly in the north, close to Béthune. We have more than 200 people, but we have labs in Japan, in the United States, in China, and in India. What about our solutions for today and tomorrow? So which are the solutions that we can obtain from the product that we process? As I said, maize, wheat, potato, or peas. We have similar ingredients. We always find protein, starch, fiber, and a little bit of fat and oil. So today we extract protein already, especially wheat, the gluten, and we develop peas. But I'm going to talk about it later on. The protein is not something new. It's something that will be increasing, and we are going to see why. Now, what about the solutions that we suggested today? These solutions are with a rate of plant-based protein, which is higher, but we always try to introduce soluble fibers. We talk about the perception of the consumer. The consumers, they do not want to lose the pleasure to eat, but they want to have less energy, fewer calories. So we have to balance these two possibilities in order to innovate with products that will have less calories, less animal protein, but it will be always a pleasure. So we have to combine both. So as to the protein, which are the stakes, which is the context we are located. Today, there is an important increase of the population. We talk about 9 to 10 billion inhabitants in 2050. So we have a need in energy, in water. This is increasing, of course, these needs. We still have the problems of greenhouse gases. So the development of a plant-based protein, this development is not the solution, but can be part of the solution of this problem. We see that if we look at the animal protein, we have a high consumption in order to produce meat, in water, consumption in water, in plant-based protein. We talk about 10 to 15 kilos in order to make 1 kilo of animal protein, and with a very high consumption of water. So therefore, the consumer, think about it, think about the food, think about the food that must be more balanced, to have different sources of protein, not only to eat animal protein, but also you talk about flexitarianism. You have to have food not only based upon animal protein. So a few figures. I didn't say that before, but with the increase of the population, with the increase in the increase of food needs of the population because of the increase of the purchase power, we are going to have an increase in the needs of protein. And we see that the protein market as a whole at the world level is $32 billion. It represents 6.5 million tons. It's a huge market, and there is an increase because of the increase in the number of a population and the evolution of the needs. The increase is such that we have an annual growth of 7%. So I have recent figures on the plant-based protein, and it explains this trend. A recent study showed that in 55% of the Americans in 2016 consume more and more plant-based protein, and 30% of the people born in 2000 consume every day an alternative food based upon plant-based protein. And it represents 70% of them do it twice a week. So what does it represent as to the figures today? The United States are ahead of this aspect of the use of a plant-based protein for human food. In 2012, we talk about $500 million in the United States for the menu based upon plant-based, and we have a rate of increase in order to reach 5 billion in 2020. So you have a trend to use more and more these plant-based protein, and therefore we look at the various types of protein that we could have. Of course, we have the wheat gluten, which meets some needs, but we also try to develop other protein. And for 10 years, we based ourselves on the pea. So we extract the protein from the pea, from the yellow pea, and this is why I'm going to explain that. Concerning the protein of the pea, you have an advantage of a CO2, so you have the figure in front of you, 0.5 kilo for a kilo of pea. So it's very weak. So we have a water consumption which is lower, and you see the figures in front of you. You have a 50% less of water consumption, so you have an environmental aspect, but for the carbon footprint and the water, and then you have another aspect, an agricultural aspect, because the pea has an advantage. That is to say, the pea is will fix the nitrogen of the air, and the nitrogen of the air will be found in the roots, and afterwards it's going to become, it's like a fertilizer. It's going to be a nutriment for the following harvester. So if we have crop rotation, if you put pea and then afterwards you put wheat, you have to put less input, the nitrogen, less fertilizer for the wheat, and studies show that you can have consumption which is lower afterwards. So it's the INRA study showing that having a yellow crop between two wheat crops, you can have less than 100% of energy consumption and minus 14% of greenhouse gases. So you have a systemic interest in the crop rotation. So we should modify this practice, and we should include some plant in the crops, and we should change them from time to time. So we could put organic nitrogen in the crop. So this is an advantage. We have seen the environmental aspect, now the agricultural aspect. And there is also another one, it's the nutritional aspect. The pea protein is not allergen compared to other proteins, so you have advantages for the health. And of course, you have a low glycemic index. It's rich in nutrients. So you see, you have a lot of advantages for the pea. And therefore, we develop this source. We started 10 years ago, as I said, with Suresnes. Before we had the potato starch industry, Vico, and we focused the production of potato starch in Amiens, and we did change this industry in a protein industry on the basis of the pea. So we started 10 years ago, and we started to develop the peas and peas protein. Today, we process 80,000 tons, and we increased the capacity. We have made 40 million investments in 2015, and we are doing exactly the same in 2017. So we try to follow the trends of the consumers. The consumers ask for product, plant-based products. So as I said at the beginning, the market is increasing in the United States of America, and there is a trend. There is an important market, so you have big volumes, and pea is also a crop which is present in Canada. Canada is the first producer of pea in the world. And therefore, we have decided recently to invest in units, greenfield units, in the Manitoba region, with an investment of 300 million euros of investments in order to have a capacity of 125,000 in order to process the pea. So in Roquette, we are going to have 250,000 tons as a capacity production in order to meet the need of the consumers. The range of a product is Neutralis. We are going to find it in different formulas. We are going to sell it to the agri-food industry. They are going to use these ingredients with other ingredients in order to make the product for the consumers. So we are going to have it. You see several applications in dairy products, snacks, device, Mars, for example. We can also add a protein. We can reinforce the protein content. So we have a lot of advantages as a solubility, nutrition, and therefore this is an alternative for the future, among others, insect or other plant-based protein, in order to have a wide range of types of proteins that we could consume and that are diversified. Of course, we are not going to replace completely the animal protein, but we are going to have a flexitarianism regime. If one day you do not eat an animal protein, we have alternatives, and this will also be very pleasant to eat, and we will take into account the environment.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. And I have a question, a clarification. When we talk about this topic before the day of today, you gave figures of a difference of consumption between the Netherlands and France. Maybe you could recall these figures and explain why in the Netherlands you have a high consumption of a plant-based protein, but in France it's only the beginning. It is true that in France we are lagging behind compared to the Netherlands, compared to Germany. In studies show today that in the Netherlands, as a matter of fact, we have 6 kilos of substitutes of meat, plant-based products, per inhabitant and per year. It's not a lot. We talk about 100 kilos of meat as an average in Europe, but we have 6 kilos compared to 75 kilos of animal protein. In France, we have only 2 kilos. So the market share is 3 times less compared to the Netherlands, but we do have an increase. Germany is in between 3 kilos of substitution per inhabitant per year. But the Netherlands are ahead of all the other European countries. They start earlier. And I believe they have an international culture, and they are more open to changes. For us, cooking is a kind of a culture. It's quite different. They are much more open than we are. I discussed with the CEO of companies, Keuten, and they develop a plant-based product, and they say, okay, the butcher of my district say that. Some people say, oh, do you have a plant-based steak? So he said, yes, I'm going to diversify. I don't want to have only animal steak. I'm going to have a plant-based steak. This is not the situation in France, but there is a trend. There is a trend, and the youngsters are pushing this trend. It's a question of a generation, I believe. And my generation is a traditional one, but the youngsters are open. They wanted to have a diversity of their food, and they wanted to become more international. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to give the floor to the next speaker. He's going to talk about the McCain approach.
C'est bon. Bonjour à tous.
Hello, everybody.
On a eu deux présentations intéressantes.
We had two very interesting presentations on what we could have in our food tomorrow and what we're already doing. The basic question is: are we going really be able to put anything on our table anyhow? In 2030 we will be 9 billion people. It is an incredible growth in the humanity's history, and how are we going to be able to assure a healthy food, sustainable food, while regenerating ecosystems and by stopping the climate warming? This is a very difficult question, and solutions are not easy. There are a couple of initiatives starting. We have startups all over, and we heard testimonies on new ways to eat, like insects, algae, plant-based proteins. In future, this item will play a real role. However, we need to know, we mustn't forget that consumers are looking for traditional food, healthier food, local food, a seasonal food, and food without risk. I mean by that, by using less chemical products or proteins that have not been grown with antibiotics or other products. Consumers want to know what they have on their plate, and they want to know how it has been produced or raised. Agriculture, hence, is a vital sector to bring nutrition to the planet. However, agriculture is being put under constant pressure and must face three main challenges. First one is the availability of soil, of surfaces. It is limited, and nowadays we see that there is a conflict between production of vegetables, other raw material for the nutrition and the production for the cattle and the agro fuels. FAO tells us there is 1,670,000 hectares plus 120 million in the next 12 years. It is in South America and in Africa. We will reach in total 1,670,000 in 2030. But above and beyond, it is going to be difficult to get more surface. After that, the new soils we will develop will just compensate the surfaces we are going to leave behind. We abandon 3.6 million hectares every year because they don't produce anymore, and 1 million every year being abandoned too, because we build on, we construct. Good soils are not always available, and we need to care for them, especially we need to protect the big woods, tropical woods, in order to preserve the climatic balance and the biodiversity. This is the first challenge. Second problem is the degradation of soils. 20% of the agricultural services, the 300 million hectares on the screen, are degraded, and their fertility is diminishing in a dangerous way. This is the case in the Sahel region in Africa because of dryness, erosion, sun erosion. It is very badly irrigated in Central Asia, and they are being salted. The climate change, the big climate change, produces or enhances these soils disappearing in a way for agriculture. So all these factors will create great problems in future. Last but not least, and it is difficult to perceive in a region maybe, but it is a real problem. A lot of agriculture and poor farmers leave their soil because of climate problems, as we said before, like dryness, but because of armed conflicts. Consequences is that the farmers leave the rural zones and go to the cities. This creates a lot of problems. Nobody produces, and it has an impact on the biodiversity. We have a lot more and more refugees in the world, and this is going to have an impact on agriculture in future. In the past, after the war, we thought we would have the solution, the great solution, ultimate solution, and we developed an industrial solution in order to have very efficient technologies to standardize them and use them all over the place in the whole world, and accelerate the intensive agriculture worldwide. We know today that agriculture has reached its limits. We use massively chemical stuff, which produce problems on the environment, on the health of the farmers and of the consumers. We used different genetically modified items, and all of this brought problems on the soil. Farmers had to leave. In a lot of countries, the little farmers disappeared, and hence the farms became bigger, and it had an impact on biodiversity. So we need to reinvent agriculture. This is very important for the future, and it is in McCain. We are a farmers company. this is something we have at heart. We are convinced that an agriculture respecting the environment and the people, I mean by that the farmers and the consumers, is possible. In future, there are solutions, and we are convinced, like the permaculture, the agroforestry, or agriculture in urban areas. But these are solutions that are beginning. It's going to spread out. It isn't a trend, but we are still at the very beginning. So we need to act today. Today we have the problem, and hence today we need to act. So when you're in front of such a situation, we need to be at the side of our farmers in the world and bring them our know-how, to the agricultural communities, to the rural communities, to enable the future of agriculture in France, but in Africa and other small emerging countries. In Europe, we're working with 1,600 partner farmers, and we are coaching them to improve the sector and improve food. We are active in 4 big areas. First one is the impact on the potato, on the soil and the quality of products. Our goal is 0 pesticides and 0 chemical product. I see Philippe is here. He's working a lot on this subject. At short term, we are working on 4 items. It's reducing inputs, chemical inputs, by using prevision tools and detection of diseases on the potato plant. We're using equipment, high technology, drones, IT, and others. And these tools enable to choose the right treatment and using phytosanitary the best way, and to reduce their quantity in order to improve and optimize their use. This is not easy because the manufacturer of chemical product would like to produce more. So we are really fighting against this trend. The second action we have, and it's not always easy, is using natural-based product and not traditional chemical products. Philippe, he's sitting here. He is developing an interesting system. It works well on potatoes to stock potatoes and to spray them with a new process with natural extract, and in order to have the same results, however, without any negative impact on the stockage of potatoes, the storage of potatoes. Another aspect we are developing is the culture of new varieties, natural varieties. It's not, we are not mixing genes or so. We are working on natural cross-fertilizing. And the last varieties we developed helped us to decrease in a big way, to decrease the use of inputs and the use of water irrigation that is a big problem in agriculture. And then, last but not least, we're working on its biodiversity. When I speak about biodiversity, look at me and say, you are really utopia. No, we are working with the farmers to preserve the different surfaces, non-cultivated surfaces. We need to have a good development of the plants and of the insects who are protecting the crop. And just as an example, we installed on a site, industrial site we have in Arn, bees. Hence, the non-cultivated soils can produce honey. And we share the first northern France honey with our staff. The other sector we're working is the transformation of products. There is a request, a demand from the consumers. They want to know what they eat. Traceability is key, local production, good practices in agriculture, and well-balanced, healthy food recipes. This is a main aspect. So at McCain, we are we're looking a lot on this. We are using local food by local farmers with total traceability, with local recipes, and the ingredients, the oil, for instance, have been formulated by experts and are recognized worldwide. Another very important issue is the relationship, the partnership with the agricultural world. Without the farmers, there are no potatoes, and without potatoes, there is no McCain. We could not exist. For us, it is very important. We have to have a very good relationship and very efficient and tight relation with the farmers. We developed a system of contract and contractualization with the farmers. It runs over more years, several years. It gives them visibility and gives them a constant revenue, and it doesn't depend on market fluctuations, depending on the potato price on the world market. And we set another effort on young farmers. This is a main issue, even in a country like France. Young farmers leave their farms because their revenue is too low. So we need to ensure them the revenue and give them the training they need, the visibility they need for their future. This is extremely important. You want to make sure that the farmers don't go to the cities and hence develop big farms. And then we have another action on the less developed countries. Globally, we set agriculture in the center of our research and development policy. We act outside the zones where we transform the potatoes. In Colombia, for instance, we have a little site we created with Mohamed Yunus, who is the Peace Nobel Prize. We have a social business in order to enable the farmers who had to flee because of the narco traffics and so on, to bring them back to the soil. We need the farmers to be on the countryside and to give them the training, to give them access to the market, to have a better revenue. And we are launching a respectful agriculture without pesticides, without chemical products. More than 2,000 people participated and were thrown out of poverty. And we did the same project in Greece. And we're working today by setting the same type of project in Morocco. We have a project called Moulatiker with Moroccan partners. It's a co-creation, and we will present this project with Professor Yunus in a couple of weeks. We'll come back to that later. At the end, let me conclude by saying we can feed 9 billion human beings by regenerating ecosystems if we accept to reinvent our agriculture. There are solutions, constructing autonomous systems in every zone and every region. There are other solutions. We've seen the new products presented to us early on. We've seen there is another topic we are working on, and we're not the only ones, is reducing the waste, the food waste. And I think if we all do our parts, agriculture, transformers, industrials, but consumers too. We will all contribute to have a better world and a world that enables its children to eat healthy food. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I have a question with regard to community. Local community, use this term a lot. I would like to know, what is this, a local community? And what is the link between these communities? When we speak of a community, it's because we see that agriculture is at the basis of our society. In order to eat, we need agriculture, and without agriculture, we will not be able to eat and develop society. Hence, there are people together. They live together in a community, and they're developing. We belong to these communities. It can be, for instance, our environment in Europe. And this is the reason why we participate in the World Forum. This is why we want to participate in the north of France in public life. A community can be in smaller areas, in remote and poor areas, people living in villages. And we need to work with them even if physically we're not near them. We have a social role we need to play, and looking at the public, we live from agriculture. However, we need to be at the side of agriculture, help agriculture. Not only those with whom we work can help us live, but also the farmers who have difficulties to survive in other countries. This is the reason why in McCain we put the local farmers' communities at the center, even if it's not communities we are doing profit as a company. Then another question to the three of you, maybe in order to widen the scope. When we speak about community, we include politics, local politics. Do you have an opinion? What is the role of the politics in order to improve nutrition? Are they part of the chain? Politics are just like everybody, human beings. Some know, some don't. It's not because you're a ministry, you know everything. And I think it is a teamwork. We need to work together and eat better. We need to work together to solve the problems of migrants, of refugees. We need to solve the problem for contamination, pollution. There are not politics on one side, consumers and transformers on the other side, and the farmers. This was before. I think the world of tomorrow is where the people, because they have to, they're obliged, need to work together. And those who do not work together, who want to remain at the side, will be alone. The politics will not be re-elected. The companies, nobody will buy the products. So we need to work together in order to change our society. As of today, the future of our world depends from a fundamental change of our society. And this is something we need to start right now. There's a lot of things to do. We're not here yet. And the politics are part, like us and like we do, in this process.
In order to explain the situation in France, with the partnership in industry, politics, scientific community, two initiatives were launched 2 years ago. We set up an association, Protein France and Nouvelles Ressources. They group all the industrial stakeholders, startup processing industry in France, for the plant-based protein, all types, and also the insect company is a member of that. We also have an agri-food industry like Bertha, Royal Canin. So there is a will to set up a department. It is supported by the politics because the document was signed by the previous Minister of Agriculture and last year. So now it has been launched. We try to work with the politicians in order to launch initiatives, Protein France, and we try to help the investments, and we try to speak with one voice on the plant-based protein and new resources. New examples, this État Général launched by President Macron, and we are a stakeholder. We are members of several workshops on circular economy, for example, and we see the circular economy, the use of plant-based products for nutrition. This is quite interesting. So there is a support, and today you have several initiatives, but we have to work together. We do not have on the one side the consumers, on the other side the politicians. We have to work together, but sometimes we have to do something in order to go ahead. Exactly the same thing for us in Canada during the developing of an emerging product. We have to have the support of the government. We see different European approaches. Example, the Stockholm label in Sweden is supported by the government in order to become possibly insect city. And this comes, it starts from the Swedish government. Of course, when it is an emerging product, a new product, the government is worried about the health of the population. So the government wants to have evidence on some aspect of the product. But by working internationally, of course, the Canadian government is going to look at what is happening in France, and then they are going to replicate it, and they are going to accept it or not. And in Canada, our project is supported by Laval. Laval is interested in these new proteins. If we sometimes and very often it works, all together we can do something good. Nutrinet is an example. Nutrinet is an example of labeling, and it was developed by Professor Herzberg and pushed by the previous government, continued by the present government, supported by McCain and Danone, because this is a real system. It makes it possible to give the exact information to the consumer. Unfortunately, all the multinationals have not chosen to do that. They wanted to have another system. But what is important is that if we work all together, we can do something. If we can help Nicolas Hulot, if he is alone, we can help him. So we have to fight together for the sake of the consumers, of the farming and the society. And once again, for the new product, what we decided to do in Quebec, because we have 7 companies that started insect products, we decided to work together in order to open the market. And when we wanted to open up a market which does not exist, it's an emerging market, we have to work together in groups. Even in 5 years' time, we are going to become competitors. We have to open the market together at the beginning. As a matter of fact, we have to be responsible, all of us. That is quite clear. But in this responsibility, you have the state, the industrialists, the consumers, but you also have the media. And therefore, we see that we criticize such an ingredient, the fat, the salt, the sugar, and it can be other products. But we have to realize that the problem is not one ingredient. You have to say, you have to eat in a balanced way. And the problem is the quantity and not the ingredient. We have to inform the consumers in France, of course, but transparency should not become an index for some products. You can be afraid of eating insect, but insect has a good quality, so you have to train people, to inform people. But you have to focus on the balance, and this goes through education. Today in the schools, it is compulsory. It's in the law. It's compulsory to have a meat in the main dish given to the children. It's compulsory. But we can change that. We can see you can have a protein dish, but it cannot be compulsory to have a meat-based product. So we have to have an holistic approach. For the consumer, it must be balanced, and we have to take into account the environmental aspect, which is highly sensitive for the consumer. The notion of a collective, notion of education, the concept of working together in order to improve the situation, I think that this is important. Now for the consumers, which are the leverage that make it possible for the consumer to eat in a better way? A major problem is the education of the consumer. We, unfortunately, I must say, in the media, we do not have a genuine approach, a systematic approach of information of the consumer. And today, the media attack one ingredient, another ingredient. They do not have an holistic view about what is good for the consumer. As far as I am concerned, I am optimistic, and I believe that the consumers will change things, and especially the young people. The young people will change the world because they do have another vision. They have a vision which is much healthier about the situation. They see what is happening. We are a little bit blind. Our generation lived in the nice years. We didn't have any difficulty. Today, the young people see that the planet is suffering. They see what is happening. So I believe that they will bring the change, and the consumers should push the industry to change. If the consumer decides not to buy a product, the problem will be solved. So they have a basic role to play, the consumer, and we have to take into account what they say. We still have an important role to play as an industrialist. I prefer the word complementarity, information, than transparency between the various ingredients and the different cultures. We have to see the differences in order to attract the consumer, and this must be done thanks to the information. Of course, food. Of course, in order to find out new ingredients, we have to work. When I was younger, I didn't like a lot of ingredients, but I started to like them when I work. So you should provide for activities. So they should have some tasting session. They should play with the product. And I think that this is quite important. You talk a lot about the younger people, and we see that there is an evolution in the digital world. Cell phone, for example, but we also have everything linked to the development of a startup. Philippe Vasseur was accompanied by a robot on the first day. How do you see the digital aspect in the food? It's going to have an impact on the whole chain. it started at the production, a new technology in the farming, and we have the access to the consumer. We can imagine a world where the access, the direct access between the producer and the consumer, and the digital aspect could be taken into account. Yesterday, I spoke with the young people, and there was a kind of a competition between these young people, and they had a lot of new ideas about how to build this link between the producer and the consumers, and so that the producer could have a direct access to the consumer, so that both know one another. And we come back to a human situation, to a world where the individual plays a role in society and is no longer a number, and nobody is taking care of the human. The digital aspect is present everywhere. It is true that the food must be adapted to the new way of life of the young people. And a startup got an award. It's called On Breakfast. And it's young that developed that. They have developed a plant-based beverage so that the young people that do not have the time to have a breakfast, it's a social jet lag. They are still on their social media, social network, and in the morning they do not have the time to have a breakfast. And the social jet lag must have some protein. So this start up on breakfast. And they invent a protein-based can, and they can drink and at the same time surf. And they can drink, and all their protein needs are completed thanks to this beverage. So you have opportunities created by the changes. And we have to adapt ourselves, of course. We have to adapt ourselves to the new behavior, to the new way of life of the young people. It seems to me that this startup thought about the distribution circuit. Yeah, it's going to be distributed via the digital world. It's going to be launched by a selling technique like Amazon. It's exactly the same. I think that the digital aspects are important. All the Skype life, this is important, and for us, as a processor, it makes it possible to show the inside of the plant. It is important because people can be reassured, can see how we process, why we process. And if we talk about the robots, one of the stakes is how to automate the plant. So we should do without this repetitive gesture. So we wanted to have a robot instead of somebody who is doing a routine job. So people will be happier because the human being will not become a robot. So we are going to have a few questions in the room, in the public. Who wants to ask a question?
Bonjour, Louis Latour.
Louis Latour, Fédération des CUMA. I have two questions. I wanted to know, on the basis of this huge concept you have described, what can you do with your products? I think about global gap, and you talk about a problem of a generation, and this problem of a generation can be seen with the farmers. And the second question for Mr. Rudbellen, you are going to work on the plant-based protein only, or what are you doing with the insect? quite obviously, the farmers are part of a society, and therefore, with the farmers, we have exactly the same problem as in a society, with one exception. The farmers are people that have a very weak income, low income, and therefore the young people are leaving the farming sector. So this is something we should take into account, so that a society could have agricultural products. Even if we have a plant-based protein, you have to do that. The insect, you have to breed them. So we have to take into account this approach, and this is a problem of society. It's not a technical problem, as a matter of fact. The consumer must accept to pay the right price to the farmer. If the consumer does not accept that, the farmers will disappear. The most important innovation that we have to do is a social innovation. The technical innovation is something very easy. And we are obsessed by the new drones, smartphones. There is always something new, but this is a technique. The real innovation is a social innovation, the innovation in society. For example, the social business, it's a real business, it's a business, and the objective of this business is to attack a social problem, and the objective is not to generate dividends for the shareholders. So this is a basic change in society. It's a new approach. So the companies will gain money, but the money will not go into the pocket of the shareholders, but in society. So especially with the agricultural world, we have a lot of things to do. And if I talk about the young farmers, it's because I'm worried. I'm worried when I see the few young people in the agricultural world. The son of farmers go to they become engineers, and very few of them are still a farmer. They will go and work with Bonduelle, Macken, Roquette, Le Safre, but they will not go back to the farm of their father. So this is a basic problem to be solved, and it's not going to be solved with money, with subsidies. We have to solve the problem of supply and demand, and we have to give a good salary and a good income. As to the insect, for Roquette, we do not have any program on insect. We have to choose, of course. When you choose, you renounce. Johnny Hallyday said that. But we invest. We have 300 million in Canada, 80 million. So it means 500 million of new investments for a turnover of 3.3 billion. So big investment. So we have to make a choice. But there is an obstacle to the development of insects in Europe. They are not authorized in human consumption. Today, you cannot sell food containing insects. So there is a regulation to do in Brussels. It's not possible for the human consumption. The company insect, Safre, the insect company is working quite hard in order to change that because this is an obstacle. And this is an ecosystem. And if we wanted to grow insects, you have to give them something to eat. And we are going to give them what? So you have a kind of ecosystem, and the agricultural world is not discarded in this insect world. Of course, we focus on insect, but we also like animal protein because in the wide range of processed products, we use animal and plant-based protein. And we, in Canada, the production of animals are subsidies for 90%. So, of course, when the people do not want to pay for the quality of a product, and they know that the farmer can get 90% of a subsidy, if he has no product, no subsidy, what is going to happen? And if they get a subsidy, they make mass production. And so, of course, for the insect, you have different types of insect. We focus on one insect we have chosen also, but some insects in front of use plastic, so we could use them in order to control waste. But this is another option.
Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres questions dans la salle?
Other question in the room?
Merci. Merci. Bonjour, Manon Orion, chargée de RSE développement durable chez Happy Restauration. J'avais une question à
I have a
Monsieur
question
Bernou
for
de McKay,
Mr.
du coup.
Bernou of McCain.
Vous avez parlé donc de
You
nouvelles
talk
techniques
about
culturales,
the new
telles que la
techniques,
permaculture,
permaculture,
urban
urban culture,
selon vous,
and
elles étaient
you
à leur
have
début.
said that it's only the
Et donc,
beginning.
je voulais savoir,
I wanted to
est-ce que
know,
vous avez décidé de soutenir ces nouvelles
did
techniques
you
culturales?
decide
Et si oui,
to support these new techniques? And if the answer is yes, how? We have a pending test in the whole world for these new techniques. We have a test on pilot fields, pilot farms. We look at the situation. We try to see how we could have the good yield, the good output by suppressing the use of chemicals. So we have a pilot test in order to develop this type of a product. It's the same when we suppress plant-based products in order to check and to see whether it works. We had pilots on the storage of mint. So this is how we work in McCain. We test, and then when we see that it works, we extend it, we enlarge it. When we test, I mean that we invest so that people can happen. Now, as to the drones, we would like to buy a startup in order to work with them, in order to develop new technologies, new systems, in order to be very close to deal with one spot and not the entire field. I would like to add one thing, if I may. We have a region in Quebec for 20 years. They have been specialized in permaculture alternative crops. It's the region of Estrie. 20 years ago, they started to make products, cider, for example. They have an apple tree without any fertilizer. It's an organic cider. It's very difficult because you need a lot of protection. Of course, this is a long-term process because 20 years ago, 15 years ago, when they started with this approach, it was a pilot project. But now several companies, several projects, several startups wanted to be new, and they go to this Estrie region because it started a long time ago. In 2020, they wanted to have a zero waste. So it's an excellent approach. Well, this is what I wanted to say.
Le micro, là,
J'ai une question ici sur votre
Il y en a une à notre droite, je crois.
Bonjour à tous, merci pour vos interventions.
Thank you very much.
J'ai une question pour
I
Claude sur la
have a
fin. Tu mentionnes les
question.
vertus,
You
des
talk
insectes qui
about
peuvent manger
the
du plastique,
insect,
mais comment est-ce qu'ils
that
transforment le
can
plastique, puisqu'on sait
eat
que le poisson
the plastic. We know that the fish is eating the plastic, but we eat the plastic afterwards with the fish. With the research center, quite oddly, the insect is able to change that plastic into protein. And we are going to target not a human world, but a market of domestic animals instead. We also have other vision, other mission. The plastic can be eaten, and this insect can be processed in a meal in order to have a compost. And we can have zero waste. An example. And the mealworm is living in the meal, but he has no trace of a gluten. Chemically, he is processing the gluten, and the mealworm is certified without gluten, even if he eats gluten. There is a question here.
Oui, bonjour. Alexandre Poirot, directeur d'Idée Alsace. Moi, j'avais une question par rapport à...
Bonjour. Hello, I have a question. Yesterday we had a talk on the right on experiments. You spoke about legislation problem, politician. What are the breaks, the opportunities? We had the États généraux in France on nutrition. And there is a problem in timing in terms of the right of experimenting. In the États généraux we had in France, there were 14 different workshops. There was one where we discussed the topic, but the conclusions are not yet published. I did not belong to this workshop. I couldn't tell you what they said. It is a topic that is known. It is important. However, we need to wait for the conclusions because there were two steps. One phase, and then there was the analysis of the value and so on. It is still ongoing, but the right of experimentation is part of the topic, and we're waiting for the conclusions. Thank you. Right, we'll have to stop here. I was told we are already beyond the time available. Sorry if the guys who had a question. Thank you a lot for three speakers. And we'll meet again in 2015 to see whether or not we were right. Bye.